to this place. It's called Mike's Daily Podcast.
It's Mike's Daily Podcast.
I'm Mike Matthews. Hi.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
I notice when I try to say to my phone, hey Google, play Mike's Daily Podcast. Don't fool me. It plays some other guy named Mike and his podcast, and it's really annoying. But thank you for listening to FF episode 2855.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
We are here to learn some interesting stuff and to hang out at
Mike's
a relatively
Daily
inexpensive
Podcast
place. It's so inexpensive, it costs $0 to be here, to hang out. Thank you for listening to the show and being here at Café Anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley 10, the last place on earth, in the land of Ameritopica, with fascinating Ameritopicas. Like, for example, here's an interesting topica. Mike, he has decided that he's going to use Google Chrome in order to do all of his computer work. And he's using a Windows device. Yet when he clicks on those wonderful tabs, you know how you make all those different websites, they become little tabs? And he clicks on a tab, it takes 20 minutes for it to open! Gen X finally has topped the boomers. Okay, boomer. Gen X finally tops boomers with the 401k balances. But will it be enough to retire? Yes, for the first time ever, Gen X workers saw their 401k balances top those of baby boomers. This according to Fidelity data. And this from USA Today and Midori Lee. Balances for Gen X workers who have been saving for 15 years averaged.
And here's today's podcast picture. Get
this amount. $543,400. The podcast picture. Oh, it's of someone you may know. It's me. It's a picture of me. Working on a microphone and things. See it at mikesdailypodcast.com. It's a moody, interesting picture. The late great Basil the Boxer often would hang out on the couch here at Café Anyway whilst I did a podcast. And then, recently, my cat, Rocky, he was hanging out on the couch as I was doing my podcast and sleeping. Aw, pets, they're the best.
It's pretty interesting.
So the balances for Gen X workers who've been saving 15 years averaged over $500,000. That's $200 more than boomers, according to the financial services firm's analysis of its more than 22 million.
Which is a very good thing. Which is a very, very good thing.
22 million accounts is what a very, very good thing for them, anyway, for Fidelity. In the first 3 months of this year, Gen X is considered born between 1965, so I got in there, and 1980. So
Mike, it's Mikey Fikey. Great.
I'm Mikey Fikey, and I was born 3 years after that start date. And my ex-wife was born on the date, the last year. So technically she was also a Gen Xer, although she acted a lot like a millennial.
This nightmare of a show.
And would say things like, this is a nightmare of a show. No, she's pretty supportive of the podcast. In fact, she met my lovely lady friend a couple years back. It's been like, they met, wow. Was that 6 years ago? Yeah.
Everybody make some noise!
Oh my gosh! What? I wasn't expecting
Bringing
this.
to you
This was
live
unrehearsed.
From
completely unrehearsed. Absolutely.
Podcaster Valley Mont.
I can't tell you how happy
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Thank you. But she would say, she said to my lovely lady friend, they met once. And she said, have you listened to Mike's Daily Podcast? Have you been on the show? is what she asked. And she said yes. Because my ex-wife did not want to be on the podcast at all. Nada. But my lovely lady friend, she'll be on here and there. Although it's been a while since she's been on. So 1965 to 1980 is considered Gen X. It is the next generation. Have a root beer and celebrate if you're a Gen Xer. To retire behind the boomers that were born between 1946 and 1964. And they are retiring now. There they all just went. Gen X is often referred to as the forgotten generation, sandwiched between the large and culturally powerful boomers and millennials. It's also the first generation to start working as 401ks replaced pension plans. Yeah, I don't even know. I'm a Gen Xer. I have no concept of what a pension is. I would hear my dad and
Mike's Daily Podcast Master Pod Eater.
My dad and his daddy and his daddy's daddy and his daddy. Okay, here's my little theatrical production of how they sounded when they complained about pensions not existing anymore. You know, once upon a time, we had pensions. And you didn't have to put away money in a 401k. That's all a sham. That's all the government. What are you, nuts? So surveys have shown many of them don't have nearly enough for retirement. That would be the boomers. And Fidelity's report shows, though, some green shoots. If the trend continues, that's a good thing all around, they say.
Ridiculous random post.
Boomers are retiring, so they're not contributing to their nest egg, and instead they're drawing from their 401ks. Simultaneously, Gen X is approaching retirement, so they're more aggressively saving as they can. In fact, Gen X on average saved more of their annual pay than even what Fidelity recommends. They suggest workers save 15% of their paycheck, including employer contributions.
The Newsbleed section.
Gen X ended up topping that with 15.2 instead of 15%. 1.5. When you turn 50 years old, you can make catch-up contributions, and 14.5% of Gen Xers are making catch-up contributions. So there you go. Let me just say that the whole concept of retirement scares me. I know a lot of you think that's a finish line. Then your life's really going to begin.
Rip someone a new one.
It ain't. You got to find something you love to do. And I think a lot of people who do retire don't know what they love to do. As we go outside of Café Anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth in the land of Ameritopica. They think what they like to do is watch football games on the weekend and play video games. Well, those two activities in and of themselves will kill you. You will be dead before you're 70. You'll be sitting there smoking or vaping or whatever the stupid thing is you do. As I rip someone a new one. But that's my tip, is to not do that, to find something active that gets you physically out there and physically doing things and socializing. That's extremely important. That's up there at the top. Everybody you ever hear from, and there's a lot of people in Podcastro Valley that make it past 100, and they always ask them what do you attribute your longevity, and to what they attribute their longevity is social networks, not social media. And don't call them
the Myclopedia in Zanica.
Don't call them socials on this show. Socials are those fun events where people go to and they socialize. No, it's saying you should socialize is what they're saying. As I look at my Myclopedia in Zanica, that people that make it past 100, they've socialized and they've been together with others and friends and made new friends as the friends have died off because they've made it so far. And I didn't mean to say that with a chuckle in my voice, but it's interesting, isn't it? N'est-ce pas? The rise of Chinese electric vehicles.
Mike's absolutely useless review.
Is dividing the West. That's my review. Well, that's not my review. That's Stephen Wilmot's review. He writes for the Wall Street Journal. He said America and Europe are heading down different roads in response to China's emergence as an electric vehicle juggernaut. The U.S. is closing its borders to Chinese EVs before they even launch. The Biden administration last month raised the total tariff rate to 102.5% on Chinese electric vehicles, despite extremely low imports. Canada, whose car industry is tightly integrated with the U.S., is considering new tariffs too, in case...
Live and loco.
And that will affect you locally. Locally, it definitely affects us here. There are so many electric vehicles on the roads in the East Bay. Fremont, it's all Teslas. In case sky-high import duties don't keep Chinese EVs away, if they are built in Mexico to benefit from the country's free trade agreement with the U.S. and Canada, Washington also launched an investigation in February to assess their security risks. This could be an even more potent blocking tool, because if Trump wins, his administration is going to go even...
The whiny white man wine list.
And all Trump does, I love it that he calls it a campaign speech when it's just him up there whining. And you see, if an electric boat sinks, you get electrocuted. He didn't sound like that. I gotta turn on the Trump accent. I have never knew that politics could be so much fun. He said that. I have that as a quote somewhere, but... So they're going to go even more hawkish with this whole thing. You've heard him talk about it. And those Chinese vehicles, those Chinese EVs, they're going to be monitoring us and seeing what we do.
Matthews News.
They're even worried about that at the ports. Anything that we've imported from China, we get those big crane, those things that look like at walkers, the stuff that remove the big cranes that pull the cargo off the ships. They say have a way to they're from China, and they have a way to connect to the Wi-Fi around there, and they're breaking into our internet that way. I've heard that. I've heard that China's sending military-aged men over the borders. And it's just their way of attacking us. So,
Mike's scavenger hunt.
Whether that's paranoia or not, you have the Democratic government, federal government, being run by the Democrats. They're even putting the kibosh on all these Chinese electric vehicle imports. Meanwhile, in the European Union, additional tariffs announced by Brussels will only slow the influx of Chinese EVs. The product needs to overcome consumer resistance to unfamiliar brands, which will take time, but the market is open, says the Wall Street Journal. They also say, the Wall Street Journal, this from Salvador
News Random.
Rodriguez, this is random, Aaron Tilley and Miles Krupa say that Apple and Meta have discussed an AI partnership. Yes, it's in a hustle to catch up on AI, Apple may be turning to a longtime rival, Meta. Facebook's parent has held discussions with Apple about integrating Meta's platform's generative AI model into Apple Intelligence. Is what they're calling it, their AI.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The recently announced AI system for iPhones and other devices. Meta and other companies, of course, that's Facebook, Meta, they're developing generative AI, and they're hoping to take advantage of Apple's massive distribution through its iPhone, similar to what Apple offers with its App Store on the iPhone, as Facebook, Meta tried to come out with their own phones to compete with Google and the Android phones and Apple's phones. That did not take off. A latecomer to generative AI, Apple has developed its own smaller artificial intelligence models, but has announced it will turn to partners for more complex or specific tasks. When Apple Intelligence was unveiled earlier in the month of June at the company's worldwide developers conference, OpenAI's ChatGPT was announced as the company's first partner. And that, of course, OpenAI ChatGPT is what you find in Bing. and their Microsoft Edge. So that is where, if you had stock in ChatGPT, you'd be very happy. In addition to Google and Meta, I'm just guessing from reading this, to consult an actual person that knows about buying stocks before making any of those moves. In addition to Google and Meta, AI startups Anthropic and Perplexity, yes, Perplexity is another company that does AI. And Anthropic, I've heard them mentioned in sponsoring some of those NPR type shows. Also have been in discussions brought to you by Anthropic. That's what I heard. Also have been in discussions with Apple to bring their generative AI to Apple Intelligence. And finally, do not skip that happy hour. Losing work friendships is bad for everyone. This according to Business Insider, and Madison Hoff and Ayelet Sheffrey wrote this. Having work friends has perks for workers and employers alike. People's best friends at work create a sense of trust, belonging, and connection. From work acquaintances to work spouses, connections have changed amid hybrid and remote work. Let's see. It says here, a lack of work friends can be bad news for workers and employers. People's best friends at work create a sense of trust, belonging, and connection. Humans need each other and collaborate more effectively when they have real relationships. And people forget about that. All this stuff, online stuff, that ain't real. It's not real. It may be a relationship, but it's not a real relationship. If you're worried that a friendship will prevent... You need that FaceTime to make it real is what I'm saying. If you're worried that a friendship... You can have a friendship that is online if you must, because let's say they're far away. But at some point you need to check up on each other, see each other in person. If you're worried that a friendship will prevent people from being candid and productive, you have bigger underlying problems on your team. Great teams will attest who you work with makes all the difference, says this article. As we are outside a Café Anyway somewhere in Podcaster Valley, look who's here.
Hello, Mike Matthews. This is Chely Shoehart, gift shop supervisor. Here we are face-to-face talking, Mike Matthews. We're co-workers, Mike Matthews.
Yes. And your snow globes are eggs.
No, they're not, Mike Matthews. They're not eggs. You are misinforming the public. These are actually snow globes, Mike Matthews.
Then why does it look like an egg? And when I throw it on the ground and it breaks, there's a yolk that comes out. I don't see any water or little snowflakes.
Mike Matthews, if you want to see a snowflake, here's a joke that you could use that would put someone that's in the Gen Z generation in a bad light, Mike Matthews.
That's right. Snowflake has been attributed to that generation. Slacker was attributed to my generation. It's a thing. Look who else is here. Oh, Mike, this is Floyd the Floorman. And this is John Deere, the engineer. Wow, Mike, all that was fastening stuff, like you were fastening it to something, and so that it wouldn't move or fall off. Yeah, huh? I guess it is fastening stuff. Maybe it's also fascinating. Well, hey, you know what I missed out on? Was a Juneteenth t-shirt. Yes, according to the Daily Wire, Tyson Foods, the U.S.-based meat supplier that's grown to be one of the world's largest companies, offered shirts to employees for its annual Juneteenth celebration that literally crosses out July 4th as the nation's Independence Day. Emails obtained by the Daily Wire show that the poultry industry giant sold t-shirts for its annual Juneteenth celebration that say the holiday marking the day in 1865 that African Americans in Texas learned that slavery had been abolished in the United States long after the war had actually, Civil War had ended and slavery had been abolished, is the nation's true Independence Day. Juneteenth is my Independence Day, read one shirt offered, while another, under a crossed out July 4th date stated, Juneteenth 1865 because my ancestors weren't free in 1776. Many of the shirts also incorporated the Black Power Fist. This at Tyson Foods, interestingly enough. The California Legislative Black Caucus has gone on a blitz to promote the 14 reparation bills. The California is struggling, this according to the Washington Examiner, the California is struggling to figure out how to deal with massive budget deficit and reparations the state Democrats are looking to turn into law. The Golden State is contending with a $68 billion deficit, a loss mostly due to a decline in revenue during fiscal 2023. Still, it has been recommended that the state pay out reparations, with some estimates predicting it could be on the hook for nearly $800 billion paid out, which is 3 times as high as a typical budget for California. Wow, that, along with companies leaving the state because of the minimum wage offsetting everything, yikes. California, watch this space, because it's crazy here. I know, didn't Gavin Newsom, he said, yeah, we're going to do this investigation into doing reparations, but he didn't say anything about actually doing it. But maybe that's changing. We'll see. Maybe we'll cover that in the next podcast, which will also have Benita, the Disgruntled Fiddle Player, and the Brewmaster. If you would like to call in about anything we covered today, here's the phone number.
Call Mike at the Café Anyway hotline. Area code 510-228-4640. Will ya shut ups? Liberty Nation Freedom Foam for all.
And if you would like to find out anything else regarding this podcast, I have podcast pictures, I have past podcasts, I have interviews. I even have a radio station featuring the best obscure rock found by Mike Matthews. And you can buy my book called Podcasting. What the heck was that for? That book. You can buy that too, somewhere on my website. All that information can be found, and we find that information now as we go to the mainframe and hear from Mainframe.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!